Hello and welcome to the program Wine and Cheese. My name is Sheila Wilson. I'm a registered nurse. I'm also president of Stop Healthcare Violence and a host on Passionate World Talk Radio. I would like to thank Lillian Caldwell, who is the CEO of Passionate World Talk Radio, and Jeannie White, station manager that posts and does all the blogs for Wine and Cheese. This episode, my guests are ER nurses, and they are night ER nurses. That's a whole different ballgame there. Amy Smith from the South Shore and Beckett Agrut from the western part of the state. These two nurses have been on this program before and told us what's happening, the true version of what truly happens. Tonight I have asked them to give us some update about the personal protective equipment and assaults. Hello and welcome, Amy and Beckett. Are you able to update us today on this type of stuff?
Absolutely, Sheila.
And who would like to go first?
I guess I'll go. So my name is Beckett. I'm a registered nurse, as you said, in Western Mass. And actually Sunday morning, from my Saturday into Sunday morning shift, I was assaulted. We had to, unfortunately, re-COVID swab a patient, and because it spilled, and she became very irritated. She ended up throwing a full cup of, I think it was soda, at us. It was me and her primary nurse who couldn't do the swab just because of medical issues. And when we went back into the room, she ended up, she had shoved security, then she shoved our tech. And when I went to go help her stream, she actually got me across the face with a punch. So I ended up having my eye checked that night, but what I didn't realize is that my knee must have gotten twisted during the restraint, and I actually am leaving my doctor's right now from having that checked. So I've missed 2 days of work because of this, and it's got to stop.
It has got to stop. Have you got any report from anybody? Like maybe, I don't know if the clinical manager can call you and say, hey, Beck, how you doing?
So I'm very lucky that actually our employee health is also a police officer in the area, and he's phenomenal at following up with us and checking in. So I had all my paperwork already ready when I went to my doctor's. I'll be going back to shift Friday night, hopefully. With no restrictions, but it was a sore 2 days with a lot of ibuprofen.
Well, this is it, and that's what I'm amazed you didn't lose any teeth with the punch.
No, she caught me in my right eye and across the bridge of my nose. So I had my eye checked that night in the emergency room for abrasion because it was burning, and we didn't see anything, thank goodness.
Oh, that's good. That's really good. I'm really sorry to hear that, but this is what happens to nurses. And did you write out your incident reports?
Absolutely. I also had them press charges.
Good. Did you talk to the police?
Well, we have special police officers at the hospital, and part of their duties is to be able to write a report and summons them to court. So that was done.
Nice. So you have a real police detail.
Yes and no. So it's kind of interesting because we've discussed security at my facility multiple times on the show, and they aren't allowed to carry. The only thing they're allowed to have is a baton and pepper spray. And until a few years ago, they actually had aerosolized pepper spray, so they couldn't even use it in the hospital. It wasn't until I pointed out that they should actually be equipped with gel that they finally got that.
Wow.
So they now have gel pepper spray, but I mean, we're downtown in a major city, and we're really not protected security-wise. And it's a mixed force of maybe there's 1 to 2 SPOs on a shift, and the rest are a hired contract security company who aren't allowed to carry anything.
Right. We have all contracted security, so they carry nothing.
Yeah.
The restraint box when we yell at them.
Oh, and a lot of them actually, a lot of them won't even go hands-on. A lot of the contracted security companies won't, or aren't allowed to by their contracts.
That's not
right.
So
what is their purpose? They can't do hands-on.
You get the crap beat out of you.
I heard before I left the ER that the security guards could not do any hands-on up in the psych ward. And I thought,
security guards are trained to restrain. I mean, they do assist with our restraints, and they're very helpful in that regard.
Yeah.
But they don't carry anything. I don't believe they have any pepper spray. I know at my other facility they carry pepper spray, but you're right, it was aerosolized, and it would cause issues for the entire department when it was dispatched.
Yeah. Well, it was after Elise Wilson. It was funny. I just sat through, we just had Elise, what happened with Elise and Harrington, and we had, go ahead, I'm sorry, Sheila.
Can you just do a blurb? Matter of fact, I just talked about Elise Wilson today. Can you give a little blurb on what happened to Elise?
So she was an emergency room nurse, and she was working triage, and triage at Harrington is very isolated, similar to how it is in my emergency room. And a patient that had been there previously came in and stabbed her multiple times, ended up severing an artery. She ended up actually arresting quite a few times before they were able to life flight her to UMass. And she's thankfully currently alive and a huge advocate, but she did suffer deficits from it.
That was terrible. What I read
is
that young man was out in his car sharpening his knife. Then he went in and he watched Elise and then stabbed her, I think it was 11 times.
Yep.
Now, I understand that you can stab fast.
Yeah.
But that's a long time for somebody
to be standing. She was trapped in that triage box. She had to fight her way out while being stabbed.
Oh, my goodness.
That should have been something that never happened. But it happened.
Security doesn't have eyes?
I'm sorry, what was that?
We at least have security has eyes on registration and triage.
By video or cameras?
No, they're right there. So when you walk in our department, to the left there's like it's just a plexiglass and a little around the side. It's not a booth or a room, and that's where the security sits. And directly in front behind the plexiglass is registration, and then to the right in a little alcove is more where triage is. But security can see us.
Right. We had that in our
We didn't at the time, but now we do.
Oh, thank goodness.
After Elise.
Well, that's good.
But even then, they still have to go through a locked door to get to us if something were occurring. So it's it's an interesting system.
It is, because people don't understand. Our guys sat behind glass, but they also had cameras. But there was only 3 security guards for the whole hospital and a building behind us. And so if they're called, that's why we fought so hard to get a security guard in the emergency room 24/7. It took a while, but we finally got it, because these guys go. And they're going up to help somebody on the floors, or going over to the building, or something out in the parking lot. So even with the cameras and sitting there, they never really sat there long enough to watch what would happen. And we, in the triage department, we would be by ourselves, but we had registration. And depending upon the registration people, if they would be, I don't want to use, if they were trained enough to pick up the phone and call 911 or down to the ER. And this is just something that could be so simply fixed, and to make sure that nobody got hurt. But I don't know. So what's going to be your follow-up, Beckett?
So just monitoring, and if I have to follow up with orthopedic for right now, make an appointment with my own eye specialist, my own eye doctor. But, you know, I've filled out the paperwork, I've filed the complaints, but, I mean, it's getting to the point where it's just exhausting at this point. You know, we have multiple incidences. We've had a person who came in and threatened our registration to stab him and cut off his family members' heads, and then 2 days later showed back up in the ER, and luckily that same registration person, or unfortunately he was here, but I overheard him talking to the nurse he had been in triage with the night before. I was charge nurse that night, so I made security go out and wand the gentleman, because that's all we do have. It's usually kept over in our behavioral health unit. And when they did, at this point, unfortunately, he'd already come in and been triaged. So he'd already sat next to a triage nurse and was back out in the waiting room, and they found 4 knives, 5 pairs of scissors, wrenches, and a couple other sharp objects on him in a bag that he was carrying with him.
Oh, my goodness.
And, you know, we keep fighting for this metal detector, and it's actually part of our contract negotiations, and the hospital keeps trying to take it out of the contract, out of our proposals, and we keep putting it back in, and it's something that I'm just dug my heels in on at this point. And I think incidences like that, you know, and the very next night I was triage, and a patient dropped a shank on the ground. And luckily a visitor had seen it and reported it to security, and we were able to grab that. So 2 nights in a row, just weapons walking right into the ER, right into triage. You know, I had triaged that guy, and there was no reason to believe he had a knife or a shank on him, but also he didn't get to walk through a metal detector to let us know that there was something on him.
Right. Now, when you get somebody...
We're the only hospital in the area, and there's 3 hospitals that don't have a metal detector. So they know, the community knows, and that's where they come.
Right. We never had a metal detector, but what happens once you find a weapon on a patient? Are you allowed to search them? If you get a patient and you think maybe there's something on them, whether they have mental issues or not, are you allowed to have somebody kind of look in their pockets?
Yeah, psychiatric, we do a complete search. So if they're going to the behavioral health for suicidal or homicidal thoughts, they get searched. Their belongings are removed. They get specialty scrubbed that, you know, they can't use to harm themselves with. But other than that, the general population, no, not unless you have a reason to believe or you see something. And then security can search them. But it's you know, it's having to believe or having to ask too, and that's kind of, it's sad. But on top of the COVID screenings, I also, if I have any suspicion, I ask, do you have anything sharp on you that could harm yourself or us? Any needles, any weapons, and I ask now before I let them into my triage area. And it should actually be kind of, unfortunately now for emergency room nurses and for triage nurses, that this kind of becomes part of our questions.
Right.
Well,
do you think they're going to
the access to the door? It really comes down to your metal detector at that point, with security standing at the door for you to be allowed in to even register.
Yeah. Which is how it should be at this point.
Absolutely.
But it's not.
Exactly. Yeah.
Are you I'm trying to word this. If you ask the question, do you have any shops or anything else, do you believe that these people are going to tell you the truth?
Not all.
Not all of them, and I always kind of make the joke that ER nurses are the best BS detectors. We can see and we look for a lot of social cueing and facial and So there's a lot of times where if I'm suspicious of it, then I will ask security to step in and to be part of that triage. If I don't trust that individual and I don't trust their answers. But it's funny how many times they're like, oh, yeah, I have this on me. And they'll put it on the counter. It always shocks me. It always surprises me, but it always makes me very grateful, too. Yeah.
Right. No, that really sounds good. I wonder with the population that I had dealt with. No, it's not as bad as what the population that I think that you deal with, but better than I'm not even sure Amy has a good staff and not staff, patient-wise, in her area.
We have a clientele, but I feel like the true behavioral health patient that's having, a struggle with their illness is actually more apt to let you know they have something.
I agree.
That's what I think.
Yes.
I actually,
yes.
In our ER, you go from the main to the behavioral health. Last night I was in behavioral health. And I just find that true population of behavioral health patients, barring your really paranoid patient, I mean, that's a whole other ballgame of.
Right.
They want help. If they're self-presenting, they will tell you.
Yes. I agree with you.
There's so much.
I had a patient full of
that complicates that in great ways, because now they're altering their already altered mind with a different substance that can't control them. Those are the patients I fear.
Yep.
So we end up stripping down. They come in just for intoxication. Really, in the old days, it would be assault if I undressed them, and now it's a safety issue. They are going to be undressed because they are impaired, and if they even get an inkling or someone rousts them and they come up out of that bed and they're impaired and think they're somewhere else, they could come out fighting and they could have something on them. And they'll know where it is to reach for it.
Well,
they all get stripped.
Many of us have been assaulted by some of these folks, and you get really hurt. Amy, did you want to say something about the assaults? Were you ever assaulted?
Knock on wood, thank goodness, I have not been direct. I've been with other nurses when they've been assaulted. And it's a scary thing to then have to return to work. Even not that shift. If you're I say lucky enough to go home in that shift, so some of our nurses get emotionally assaulted and the physical threat is just there.
Right.
And they have to stay in that role and try to keep the composure. It's awful.
It really is. I've seen some of my coworkers picked up, thrown across the room, hit the wall, slid down the wall, and got up and went right back to work and didn't think anything about it. And so do you wonder if this person is used to this? Maybe she's in a domestic violence, relationship. I often wondered.
Well, I had this conversation with somebody the other day, and the first reaction was the typical reaction that you hear, which is, well, yeah, you deal with a different population. And then I said, well, so if that individual went home drunk and beat his wife, that's okay? Or if that individual got drunk and hit a car with a family in it and killed them, that's okay? Just because they got drunk or used drugs and then come into my facility and they decide to assault us, that's not okay.
Right.
And once put that way and they kind of thought it over, they were like, oh, yeah, I'm sorry. That was a really bad response. And I think nursing as a profession has for so long accepted this behavior and made excuses of they were intoxicated, they were under the influence, they have psychiatric issues, that we became that domestic violence victim, except for it's a workplace violence victim. And we've accepted that mentality. And I've discussed this before, that I think it really, until we change the mindset of the nurses, we're not going to change the mindset of anybody else. And we have to acknowledge that we've allowed the victimization, but now we need to stop.
That's
and we
right.
need to stop making excuses for these individuals who think it's okay to put their hands on us.
Right, right. But we really need to work on that. But I'd like to just bounce into your PPEs. Beckett, you said something about you were having a discussion today with somebody?
Yeah, with a couple people. So we got notice that one of our floors was told that their yellow gowns, which is our PPE gowns, which are lighter weight. For a while there, we were lucky that we had gotten some Ford-made PPE that were made out of airbags. And as grateful as we were to have them, they're very heavy. They're very hot. We actually have had a few nurses pass out because of how hot and heavy they are.
Oh my gosh.
And they're huge. I mean, one of our nurses was putting one on the other night, and we were using tourniquets to tie the sleeves in place because they extend about a half foot beyond her arms.
Oh, wow.
So we tourniquet the base of them so that they stay in place, so the sleeve doesn't fall, slide down, and impair her ability to be a nurse and use her hands. So I asked the interim, we have specialty bags. These are purple bags that these have to go into because it's two different laundry services. And this floor was told that they would no longer receive the yellow gowns because the gowns were being placed in the improper bag.
What?
And, and we're not the only discipline that goes into these rooms. We're not the only discipline that use these yellow gowns, but we are the discipline that are at that bedside and in that room probably more than any other discipline in that hospital. So to smack the wrists of nursing because of this was just inexcusable. So I had sent out an email addressing it and saying, I'm hoping that this is just not, that this is a rumor, but or just not how this went down. But if this is how this went down, then I have a significant issue about this, and we will be discussing it. And I'm the grievance chair for the union there. I said, so I need to know what the conversation was from your side so that I can decide whether or not I'm going to put in for investigation and informational requests to pursue a grievance on this. So I heard back from our CEO, and her response at the end was, we do need to place these in the proper bags, or we will have to use the other gowns as backups. It would be beneficial if you could, help us on educating the population, which as nurses, we're very well educated on where to put these gowns. Right. So my take on it was, I came back at her and said, well, as you're well aware, the morale at this facility is at an all-time low. And with discussions and conversations like this, it goes across all of nursing like a wildfire and causes a downward spiral. So I'm hoping that you'll be able to help with this.
Well, that's good. Maybe she doesn't know.
I'm certain that she's well aware.
Oh.
I'm absolutely certain she's well aware. Actually, we just had a meeting recently where we were told the nursing culture by our interim CNO was at a low, and it was because nurses were eating their young, in so many words, and that, it was nurses causing the poor morale and the issues. And, it's interesting when you allow management to yell at nurses in the middle of the hallway with patients around, when you allow management to violate Weingarten rights, when you allow management to pretty much be disruptive and abusive to staff, and then you can turn around and blame it on the nurses. I at one point asked her, well, aren't leaders supposed to lead and set the example, and you're allowing your management staff to do this? So, we're coming out of COVID. We're coming out of the stress of that. We're actually entering a new surge. I've seen an uptake, and it's mind-blowing right now. And it's disturbing, and it's frustrating. And, there's some days where as much as we love what we do, you just don't want to even go in.
Mm-hmm. Right. Amy, are you having this over in your place?
We are seeing a little bit of an uptick, but they're more of your asymptomatic population. And so although our area is in the red, and our numbers are still at a safe limit because they're not overrunning our CCU population.
Yeah.
We seem to have equipment. We seem to have masks at the moment, but we haven't had such an uptick that I feel like staff is running to the equipment. So I still wear my N95. I put it on when I arrive to work with a surgical mask over it. I wear it all 8 hours. I change my clothes. I take my mask off. I discard it. I get a new one the next shift.
Good.
Our guidelines are still one mask every 3 shifts, but I'm not doing it.
Good.
Good.
I can't believe what goes on. I am so glad I am not in the hospital setting right now. I don't think I could last, and I'd be much like the two of you, like a dog with a bone. And I'd have to say exactly what I want to say because everything has been wrong. For management to talk and yell at the nurses after what they have done, I mean, if they did a shift doing what you guys do, or even if they spent 2 hours doing what you do, they would understand a little bit more. I just don't understand it, and I don't understand why all of a sudden security does not help with assaults unless they've been sued too many times, and they just need to stop allowing them, because why have security if they're not there helping?
I don't think they're given the backup and the support. They're paid a minimum wage, and they're told they can't put their hands on, but they have to keep staff safe. It's a catch-22 position.
Exactly, and I mean, she's right. They're not paid what they should be.
No,
they're. The sad thing is they could probably be a barista at Starbucks and make more and have better health care and better benefits.
Maybe. This is. So I don't know the answer to that, but I've worked with some really, really good securities.
So have I.
And this is terrible. Take away what they want to help us with. But our time is coming to an end. We need to do this again soon. You still with it?
Absolutely.
Oh, absolutely. In for the long haul.
All right. I think any last-minute ideas or questions?
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, I think what we're seeing as far as like mental health and feeling the angst, and people are anxious, and giving just a little more time for your fellow person to respond to you or react to you, giving that extra 5 minutes at the drive-through or leaving to go so you drive a little bit slower and give that traffic time because somebody in front of you may be having an issue.
Yeah.
And remember, if you come to seek help from the healthcare, we're only there to help you.
Yeah,
that's right.
And we're there for your service, but we need to be respected.
We certainly do.
COVID has brought a whole new. I mean, I don't know if you're seeing this, Amy, but we're seeing a whole new clientele. It's not always the ones that we see all the time coming in. We've had a huge slew of new psychiatric population coming in.
We have too,
and we're seeing it with with our kids too, with the remote learning and with everything else. Right now is such a stressful time, and the anxiety and the depression levels, from not being able to socialize. We're social creatures, and we're now in quarantine still. How many months later? It's affecting everybody psychiatrically, and I don't think that there's a definite answer, nor is that being addressed. We're trying so hard to fight this virus that we're not we're not addressing the other portion of the patient and the humans, just the basic humans out there. Everybody's stressed. I mean, the grocer in the grocery store who's been there day in and day out for us from the beginning, even though it put them at risk, and not knowing, all of those essential workers that we didn't realize how essential they were until we had this virus attack.
Right. So our next program, how about some solutions? We can talk again about the assaults, the PPE, and add some solutions. How's that sound?
Sounds like a plan.
All right. I'm going to say my thank you, Amy and Beckett. And again, thank you to Lillian Caldwell, CEO of Passionate World Talk Radio, and Jeannie White, station manager. And thank you to Betsy for recording our show.
Always a pleasure. Thank you, Sheila, for doing it.
Yes, thank you.
All right. I certainly appreciate you coming on.